So this video is just a personal plea, a human to human, teacher to student plea. Please, for the love of all that is good in the world, don't use AI in this course to cheat, okay? And as I mentioned in an earlier video, cheating would mean generating any of the speech composition, any of the language for your speeches using AI. All of the fact claims that you make in your informative and persuasive speech should be verifiable, meaning you're citing a particular source that I can access to verify that information. I'm going to talk about this in a lecture that will come around week 7, where I talk a little bit about the ethical use of AI. But a lot of people don't realize this. I think the information's getting out now more. But large language models, AI, they don't do traditional research, right? They don't go back and search the archive or search a database, find a text, pull that text forward, read that text, and cite information from that text. It's literally guessing, right? It is a prediction model. It was fed a bunch of data, and it ran a really, astronomically complex algorithm on that data so that it is able to guess uncannily well what it thinks the response to the prompt you give it should be. And so sometimes it produces accurate information, and sometimes it produces hallucinations, fake information. And if you don't check on it, you can't really know if you have the real deal or you have something that's a fabrication. And for that reason, it's not verifiable information unless you do the verification. And so I'm asking that what goes into your speeches are verifiable use of information through proper citation. Last semester, this hit a tipping point for me in my courses. Up until last semester, it was just a handful of cases. Last semester on speech number 2, there was something around 40% of the outlines that were submitted in my online classes were flagged for AI generated content. And I understand that it's not a perfect detection system that I'm using. Turnitin says that about 1 out of 200 submissions may turn up a false positive. So I don't rely simply on the detection software. But if you're thinking that it can't detect it and that you're going to be able to get away with it based on claiming that it's a false positive, I think you're sorely mistaken. And I think a lot of my students last semester, I'm not bragging about this, it gives me no pleasure, came to find out the hard way that that's not a good enough excuse to get away with it, right? And so after, I went in and examined these flagged outlines more closely, it became very clear to me what was happening, because the AI isn't necessarily doing good work, right? And in fact, many of the outlines that were submitted had no sources, so it was drawing information from ChatGPT and not verifying it against any other sources. So if you have no sources, that's an easy 0 for me. Your informative speeches and your persuasive speeches require sources, and no sources will get you a 0. Many of them had fake sources. So the ChatGPT or the AI, whatever they were using, maybe they didn't realize it, but it gave them what sounded like an article title written by even perhaps a real person in a real publication. But when you click the URL, it goes nowhere, and there's something wrong with the title or with the date, or this author didn't actually write in this publication, and so they're fake sources. Remember, it's just guessing. It's guessing that it thinks this article is out there. And that's especially true of your traditional large or your original large language models. And then some of them, they had mischaracterization of the sources. So they were a real source, but instead of reading the source themselves, the students allowed the machine, the robot, to summarize it or characterize that source. And it really can't do that. It's not going to read the article. It's, again, just guessing what it thinks is in the article. And it's going to give a really broad, general description of what's in the article. It's not going to get into the finer details. And quite often, it's going to be wrong, right? It's going to say the article talks about something that it doesn't, right? And so these students who didn't click their URLs to figure out it was a fake source and didn't bother to read the source themselves, I did that work, and it was miserable. I'll tell you the truth. It was not fun, and this is why I'm making this video right here, to plead with you to not do this. They didn't do the work, and it was easy for me to see why. It was either them making up bad sources or a robot making up bad sources. Either way, that was cause for a 0. And so last semester on speech number 2, for example, I gave around 25 zeros, right, out of about 89 total submissions, right? So 25 zeros. That's a big chunk of those 25 students' grades. And when I talked to many of them, they admitted what had happened once I showed them how I knew. And again, it was super time consuming, and it made for one of the most miserable semesters of my career. They told me afterwards that, they just did it because they ran out of time, right? And I feel for you, because these tools are out there. They can, do what looks like a speech or a speech outline in a really short amount of time. And so you're under time constraints and time pressures, and the temptation might just be too strong, for these students. But they ended up with zeros, right? So it wasn't worth it, and it was a total waste of my time, and it kind of violated the trust between student and teachers. I think some students are doing it because, I'll admit, many of my colleagues are just not paying attention, or they don't want to pay attention, and they're just kind of putting their heads in the sand and pretending that the use of AI in a manner that would be considered cheating, pretty much doing all of the work in a very short amount of time without having to really think or read or do the kind of artistic work to create a speech. They're just pretending it's not happening. So I'm assuming lots of students are getting away with it in their other classes. Not this class, okay? I am checking, and I'm giving out zeros when I see it. So please, just do me a favor and don't do that. Some teachers are teaching how to use ChatGPT and other tools well, and I commend those teachers. I'm not personally ready yet for that, and partly that's because, I think it's not doing very good work. So the other tools and the ways I teach it produces a better product than what I'm seeing being done with ChatGPT, with AI. So it's often producing inferior work. It's flattening your voice, making it less personal. It's just basically basic, right? And then when you add to it all the ways in which it can fabricate sources, mischaracterize sources, and so on. Some of the ChatGPT things are now doing what's called retrieval augmented generation, where it does, in addition to the regular algorithm, it's searching the internet and trying to find sources. I will say, a study came out recently from Stanford University, and it shows that these retrieval augmented generation actually have the same problems as the original large language models, in that they also hallucinate. And in fact, the more information, it's counterintuitive, but the more information that you put into these large language models by doing that retrieval augmented generation actually increases the potential for hallucination. So when ChatGPT or Google does an internet search and provides you a link, sometimes you click that link and it's not even the information that Google is telling you would be found there, right? So it's just really unreliable. And so I'm not at the point yet where I'm teaching our tried and true methods of research are superior at this moment, unless you're spending a lot of time working with ChatGPT, which just seems like most of my students are doing it kind of at the last minute. So just want to say, don't use it. I don't recommend using Grammarly because it can alter your language significantly. You can get flags, and it'll bring unwanted scrutiny to your work. This class, I'm not teaching grammar, as I mentioned before. I'm not that concerned about grammar. As long as I can just read what you wrote, I want you to write in your own voices, so don't use Grammarly. Use the library. The robots, they can't access the library databases. If you're pulling your sources from the library, you're doing something that a robot can't use. I won't likely be too concerned about your work if you're using library sources. Auto-save and save the version history so that you can show your work progressed over several days. It didn't just poof, appear in 1 minute. So that's something you could do if you're worried about being accused when you didn't use AI. Save your work, show your work. Find actual credible sources of your information. If AI is telling you a fact, use that fact. Go to the databases, go to Google, try to find an actual source that verifies that fact, and then read that source. So have a verifiable source that you can show me, I can find, I can access, it's real. Read it, and then use it down to its finite or its fine details, its minutia, the particular data points. Don't just give broad, kind of vague gestures towards what these articles are about. Dig into them. Give me particular data points. Give me quotes. Give me things that the robots can't give. And again, that'll put my mind at ease, and you'll be less likely to be falsely accused of using AI. Actually read the sources yourself and don't rely on a computer to do the reading for you. Okay, so I hope you get the message. The main message in this video is you might be able to get away with it in your other classes. You're taking a big risk in this class because it is something I care about, and it is something I check, and it is something that I have penalized heavily in past semesters. And in fact, from speech 2 to speech 3, I said it was around 40% in speech 2. That dropped to under 10% for speech 3. So the message got out in my last class. It got out a little late, and I'm hoping to get the message out a little earlier to you here with this video.